Welcome, Daniel Nation, to our podcast, The Daniel Report. It's good to see everybody back on our show tonight. And this evening, I have got a great show lined up for you. We're going to be talking about banning Sharia in Texas. And my first guest tonight is going to be Congressman Keith Self from Congressional District 3. Hello, Congressman Self. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, Brandon. Great to be with you.
Good to see you again. Congressman Self is actually my congressman here in Collin County where I live. And I've asked him to come on tonight because Congressman Sharia is the big buzzword right now. So, I mean, what's the big deal? We've had Islam in America for years. Why is Sharia such a big deal all of a sudden?
Well, because they have gone on the offense. And look, we've been wondering why. They obviously believe they have a tipping point, certainly here in North Texas, which is ground zero, because they have gone on the offense with speeches. They're very open about Sharia coming to Texas, about Sharia displacing our U.S. Constitution-based judicial and cultural system. So that's why it's become a big buzzword. We also have started the Sharia Free America Caucus in the U.S. Congress. And I got to be honest with you, I think that caucus has given people, we'll say, permission, the comfort to be able to talk about what they see in their own neighborhoods. And listen, when CARE designates the Sharia Free America Caucus as a anti-Muslim hate group, you know you're over the target and they're paying attention.
Absolutely. So let's drill down a little bit into your Sharia Free America Caucus. Now, I believe it currently has 41 members from 20 states. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, why did this caucus form and what is its stated purpose?
Well, the caucus formed based on a based on a conversation I had with Senator Tuberville at the White House Christmas party, actually. And we got to talking about this issue because he says he sees the same thing in Alabama. And I said, I'm at ground zero. We discussed, why don't we have a caucus in Congress? So now he's in the Senate, and this is a House of Representatives caucus. But we started it based on that conversation. And our goal, our mission is to first educate our colleagues in Congress about what's happening across America, because if it's not yet in your district, it's coming. So that's our first mission. The second mission is to get the people of America aware of this and aware that Sharia is not just some other religion like we see on the street corners in small town America. It is a political system. It is an alternative political system to the U.S. Constitution. We like to say it's incompatible with the U.S. Constitution. I prefer to say it's anti-constitution because the laws that they espouse under Sharia, many of them are illegal under America. And the very foundation of Sharia is not based on individual rights like you and I understand it. God-given rights from our Creator that are ours. The government can't take them away from you. The government cannot, they are from our Creator. That is not Sharia. Sharia, first of all, Islam itself means submission. Sharia is the path. So Sharia is the path to submission, meaning Islam.
Wow. Now, I mean, here's the $64,000 question. How do we stop Sharia law in America? I mean, basically, isn't it protected under the First Amendment as a religion?
Well, that's the point. It is not a religion. It is a very strict, tyrannical legal code with a thin veneer of religion. But even its own adherents, if you don't follow the law, then the punishments are very, very draconian. I mean, losing hands over theft, a stoning of people for adultery. I mean, stoning to death for adultery. And I mean, I could go on. Yeah, the religion part is a thin veneer. It really is submission to this legal code, this very tyrannical legal code, is the essence of Sharia under Islam.
Okay. And I mean, I've taken some classes on Islam, and what I've learned so far is that you really cannot separate Sharia from the practice of Islam because it's ingrained in all of their manuals and books and Qurans and everything. Muhammad's book about his life, it's all ingrained, right? So, can you be a practicing Muslim and not observe Sharia?
Well, that's the issue. First of all, I want to quote from a book that young Muslims, trains young Muslims. It says, Islam is not a religion, it is a way of life. And that's kind of the attitude that we need to take. Take their word for what they think Islam is. Now, daily practice. What you're going to hear from the outliers, and frankly, the Muslims among us, most of them uh, tend to be more secular or more moderate Muslims, whatever term you want to use. So they might actually tell you that, look, Sharia consists of the five pillars of Islam: prayer 5 times a day, almsgiving, so forth and so on. But when you look at Sharia, it's much more draconian than that. And frankly, mainstream Muslims, and I get this from my Muslim brothers all the time, Christian brothers who came out of Islam, that mainstream Muslim is the more draconian, the more tyrannical form of Sharia that goes much further than what our outliers, and frankly, the Muslims that live among us primarily, are outliers of the Islam religion, of Sharia law. They kind of want to stay to themselves. But the point is, when the jihadists, the Salafists, the Islamists, whatever you want to call them, the more tyrannical form of Sharia comes, they will be considered apostates. And apostates are under the same legal prohibition that I am, which is death. So we've got to understand the moderate, the secular Muslims are outliers. That's not mainstream Muslim.
Yeah, that's a good point that you're making. I want us to talk a little bit about the Texas Constitution because we both live in Texas. Under Article 1, Section 6, freedom of worship, our Constitution states no human authority ought, in any case whatever, to control or interfere with the rights of conscience in matters of religion, and no preference shall ever be given to any law, to any religious society or mode of worship. So basically, what this states is that Texas cannot elevate or enforce any religious system, but it also says that Texas cannot control or interfere with the rights of conscience in matters of religion. So, what do we do with all of these millions of Muslims who have immigrated to our country and they feel that their conscience dictates that they practice Sharia to the letter of the law?
Well, this is where we get into why I stay away from religious discrimination reasoning for Sharia, because many of the laws that they do espouse under Sharia, honor killings, child marriage, female genitalia mutilation, on, they are against the law under the US Constitution, under federal law, under Texas law. That's why we have to be very careful about how we define our fight against this Sharia. It is an alternative political legal system. It's not a religion. Now, I am told by Texas legislators and people that work with the Texas Constitution more than I do that the Texas Constitution is more difficult to fight Sharia than the U.S. Constitution, for some of the reasons that you're laying out here, Brandon.
Yeah, that's interesting to know that insight there. So let me talk for a second about Sharia courts. I mean, right now we don't really know how many Sharia courts exist in the United States, even in Texas. And in 2017, the 85th legislature here in Texas passed House Bill 45. And what it does is it requires the Texas Supreme Court to adopt rules ensuring that foreign laws are not applied in family law cases, right? So if there's a divorce or a child custody case, it prevents a foreign law from presiding over Texas law. But this only applies to cases being tried in Texas courts. What about cases being tried in Sharia law courts?
Well, actually, we had an example in Collin County, 15, 20 years ago, where a judgment from a Sharia court in Collin County was accepted by a U.S. district court in Collin County, a felony level. Now, it's not a federal court, it's a state court, but it was a state felony level court accepted that judgment. That should not be. We have got a bill in Congress that says no U.S. court can accept an alternate political system, legal system judgment. So it's not gone anywhere yet. But I'm starting to believe that the momentum that we see may get it somewhere in the future.
I mean, shouldn't we just pass a federal law at your level where you are in Congress that just says all Sharia courts across America are illegal and put enforcement mechanisms in place where at least we assess fines or even jail time for people conducting Sharia courts?
Well, generally speaking, there is that federal law. We don't think it's clear enough, but the enforcement mechanisms are what we're talking about here, and that's what we need most of is how do we enforce it? Because it gets into the federalism issue. Of course, we can have a federal law, but when a state wants their own courts to be different, that's where we would have to go to the supremacy clause, and that's going to go to court almost automatically to determine that.
Right. So, I mean, bottom line, full stop, how would you say we stop Sharia from being exercised in our state?
Well, here's the model. They go from accommodation. They want accommodations, a separate prayer room or whatever, and then they once they get accommodation and they get people used to accommodating Sharia, then they go to the intimidation phase. That's where they start blocking streets for prayer. They don't need to block streets for prayer. They don't need to do that. That is simply a dominance move. That's a boss move, an intimidation factor. So, somewhere between there, we just need to say the law doesn't allow that. You cannot block a public street to gather for prayer. You have places to pray in your mosque. Go to your mosque because that's not acceptable. That's an intimidation move. So and then all of the things we've talked about, the child marriage, the hunter killings, and so forth and so on, those need to be very clearly stated. Those are not acceptable under Texas law, under federal law. So you have to set the lines down because I think Ted Cruz said it best of all. He said, "You're free to practice your religion. You are not free to impose your religion or any of its aspects on anyone else." That's the matter of conscience that you were mentioning earlier. Matters of conscience under the U.S. Constitution, under our Christian heritage, are left to the individual. And so that's how we set those red lines to be very clear.
I mean, some are saying, as a matter of fact, not just some, but a lot of people in my circles are saying that the Muslims are already waging economic jihad against us by buying up thousands of acres of Texas land, trying to build facilities like Epic City. And as I understand it, the way Islam works is they try to migrate and bring enough numbers together until they are strong enough to overthrow the current system and wage a hot jihad. Is there a concern that as they continue to expand the amount of land holdings they're buying, that they're going to eventually turn this into a hot jihad?
It's a great question. I will tell you that Amy Mack, who's done a lot of research on Islam for 15 years, says that in one respect, America is behind the power curve of even Europe. Because when Europe started getting its mass migration of Muslims, there was no infrastructure for them to go into. So they had to develop everything as they migrated into France, the UK, in fact, many of the countries, but France and UK are the biggest examples. She said here in the US, they've spent 30 years building an infrastructure. They've got organizations, they've got locations, they've got people now kind of inured to the fact that there are many Muslims here. So she thinks we may be behind in that respect because all they have to do now is to fill in people. And the money that you talked about, it's flowing from the wealthy Gulf states. Let's make no mistake about it. This is not, in fact, I just had a constituent report that they've discovered that Saudi Arabia is actually paying some of the benefits. Some of the federal benefits are flowing back through the countries to them. So, which means the foreign countries that are paying part of the price are getting reimbursed by the federal government is the kind of the bottom line there. So the money is very important, and we are being targeted by the wealthy Arab states, the oil states. There's no doubt about it. Is it a concern? Absolutely. But we have to also realize now is the time to have this fight because the Muslim population in America as a whole is only 1.3%. Now, that sounds very low, but in some places like North Texas, it's far higher. That's why North Texas is ground zero for what's happening. But I will tell you, Senator Tuberville says he sees the same thing in North Alabama. Florida's seeing the same thing. Arizona's seeing the same thing. So it is spreading. Now is the time to set these red lines that I talked about so that we can tell our people this is a legitimate threat. Yeah, we may only have 1.3% Muslims across America, but in the places that they are targeting, it's far higher and they have intentions.
Yeah, absolutely. How much of an impact do you think this is going to have on our midterm elections? Do you think this issue is moving the needle with voters?
I think so because we hear a lot about it. And I will give you one example a grassroots organization, I won't name them, that very carefully vets candidates, said they were shocked when the candidates would come in to be vetted. And they said, our number one issue is Sharia. And this is a fairly rural area. It's not an urban area like you and I live in. It's a fairly rural area. And I was like, really? And they said, yeah, people are aware of it. So that's what the Sharia Free America Caucus is trying to do, educate people, just like this program. And I appreciate you doing this because this is what we have to do. We have to alert the people what's happening in our neighborhood because it's real, Brandon.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we feel it at home every single day. Let's shift gears in the last segment of our interview. Let's talk about the Save America Act. Your Chamber of Congress just passed this act last week. How will the Save America Act ensure secure elections?
It's a great question, and this is the issue of the day. This is another issue that our citizens are very energized over, and that's election integrity. Look, the House passed the SAVE Act twice, 118th Congress, 119th Congress. This is the Save America Act, which is the improved SAVE Act. So it's not only U.S. citizenship, you must have U.S. citizenship in order to vote in a federal election. That was the SAVE Act. We've now added photo ID when you vote. So you have to prove that you're a citizen when you register for a federal election. And now, under the Save America Act, you must actually show a government issued photo ID so that you can vote. So we've got two guardrails there to try to clean up our elections.
Now, I was watching an interview with one of our U.S. senators the other day, and she was talking about how this new improved Save America Act, she likes some of the changes whereby you don't have to present a birth certificate every time you want to vote. It's just the first time you register. So if you change your registration or move, do you have to represent all those documents to move your registration?
No, it's the first time you register to vote because you can move your registration state to state. That was one of the changes made that you didn't have to show a formal citizenship when you vote. You do the first time you register for a federal election. So now when you go to vote, you simply have to have a government issued ID. It's not one of your formal birthright citizenship or citizenship papers. So that is the change they made to try to garner more votes in the Senate to get it across the finish line. And I will tell you, there is a tremendous pressure on Leader Thune today to bring it to the floor, even if that means they have to have the talking filibuster. The talking filibuster is nothing new. It's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, which most people have seen as a movie. You stand up. If you want to explain to the American people why you think illegals ought to vote in a U.S. election, stand up on the Senate floor and tell us why you think illegals ought to vote. That's all it is. And you can talk as long as you want to about why you think illegals ought to vote in U.S. elections. I want to see it. I think the government, I think the citizens of the entire country would be riveted on that. It would make great TV. And I would love to see the Democrats justify illegals voting in our elections. I just want to see it.
I want to see it too. That sounds like a great show.
Yeah,
I remember when Ted Cruz actually did a talking filibuster on Dr. Seuss.
that's right. He read it. That's right.
He read it to his kids back home. That was great. So, how will the Save America Act factor into closed primaries? Because I know we're trying to close the primary in Texas. I don't think it's happened for the primary, as I haven't heard that it has. So, but will this factor into how you register with a party affiliation?
No, that's a state issue. The states, and we do not want the federal government to actually administer elections. We do want to set minimum federal standards, citizenship and voter ID, uh, for federal elections. Of course, when you register, you vote for all elections, so it kind of flows down. But as far as administrate the party system and the elections in the state, that's a state equity, and I don't want the federal government playing in that sandbox. That's up to the Texas legislature. I encourage them to do it. I think they ought to do it. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's perfectly legitimate legally. I encourage them to do it, but that's not a federal issue.
Yeah. Okay. Now I know that President Trump has been calling for a return to paper ballots. Do you think that paper ballots are one of the keys to solving election fraud?
I don't think that paper ballots are one of the big keys. I will tell you, I think that mail in ballots are far more important to get a handle on because mail in ballots are the weak link in the system, particularly in the states that just mail them out willy nilly. You must have to have a legitimate reason and you have to request your ballot. I think that's reasonable, but that tightens up mail in ballots. We actually wanted mail in ballot tightening to be in the Save America Act, but the president said that might kill the bill, so we didn't put it in. But I think that's one of the ways the state could actually tighten up their mail in ballot system because mail in ballots, even more than paper ballots, are key to stopping the fraud in elections. Certainly, paper ballots have their own issues, but I much prefer them. Of course, today in Collin County, for instance, we have a paper ballot that you actually mark the little circle, but then it goes into the machine. So it's almost a hybrid system of paper ballots and machine reading.
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as overall election, solving the election fraud, we got Save America Act, we got, paper ballots. Are there any other things that we can be doing in our state to really make our elections secure moving forward?
Well, the all of the people behind the scenes, once you put your ballot into whatever the machine, the box, once it's counted, that's where we need to be absolutely clear, and that's why I encourage people to be ballot watchers, actually in the back room watching what happens, because it's vitally important what happens behind the scenes. It's the old one of the Russian leaders said it. It's not who casts the ballot; it's who counts the ballot. So we need to do that as well. We need to have people who are willing to go into the back room late at night, stay till all hours, watch the ballots being counted or manipulated, however they are back there, however they're counted and sorted and stored. Make sure all of that is right. That's one of the keys, I think. But once you go to you have the poll watchers, you have the ballot board watchers, you go to paper ballots, you go to better systems, you clean up the mail-in ballots, you make sure there's citizens voting, that you show a voter ID. If you were to do all of those things, our elections would be so much more secure. I mean, and just in those four or five things that we've discussed would be so much more secure. And I would, and that's what we're striving for, because all of us believe that only a citizen should vote in a secure election environment, and that's what we're targeting.
I totally agree. So early voting has already started in Texas. We've already talked about the Islam issue. Of course, securing elections is always an issue in Texans' minds. What other pressing issues are you hearing out there in your reelection campaign right now?
Those are the big ones. Then I think we've got the affordability issue, and look, we've got some green shoots showing up. We really do. Rates are down at a 3-year minimum. Uh, I know beef prices are high, and I would like to discuss that because now you can produce a chicken to market to the grocery store in about 6, 7 weeks. You can produce a pig in about a year. But for beef, it's going to take us longer. First of all, our beef herd is very low. And secondly, when you go through the gestation period and then getting a beef to market weight, It's 2 to 3 years. So it's going to take us a while to bring the beef prices down. Uh, but affordability, home prices are falling in some areas. The rates are coming down. I think we have got to figure out a way, and I know the president's working hard on this, to get the housing market moving again, because I think it's one of the real uh, it is that, and groceries are the real issues I see in the affordability discussion. Groceries are coming down. Some of them have come down a long way. Some have not. Look, gas is off the plate. Gas is down, going to stay down. But the housing market, I think, is the key now. We need to get it moving. The rates need to come down. We need to figure out, can we just charge capital gains in some other way so that older Americans, more mature Americans who are not moving out of their houses now to make way for younger first time home buyers. So we need to figure out how we get the more mature Americans to be moving out of their house, downsizing, and allowing the younger generation to move up. We're kind of stuck right now in the housing market. So, in my mind, even more than groceries, I think the housing market is one of the keys to getting this issue solved.
Yeah, and I know this is a state issue versus a federal, but property tax, we've been fighting for so long to get those eliminated. Are you in favor of I mean, this is a state issue, of course, so I'm just kind of getting your opinion on it, but are you in favor of eliminating property tax altogether and replacing it with a consumption tax or a fair tax or another way to tax?
I'm going to leave that up to the state folks. I'll just mention a couple of points here, but I want to leave this up to the state government. If you make it a consumption tax, it's going to be far less visible, because what do the property taxes do? They make people mad. So you've got that element of property taxes, which is good. I believe you ought to have very visible taxes so the people understand how much their taxes are. And if they get mad, then that's what elections are all about. So there is that caveat I put on property taxes. The next point I'll make is we need to reform the appraisal boards. They don't belong to the county, even though it's called the Collin County Appraisal Board in our county. But it is controlled by the school districts. And appraisals are where you really need to reform the system and the board. So I think there are changes there. I'm not going to suggest the changes, but I think there are changes there that could be made that would make the appraisal rates and the tax rates. Of course, the tax rates belong to the taxing entities, the cities, school boards, county, and junior college. But if you reform the appraisal method and processes and system, I think that will go a long way to this. But again, I like the fact that property taxes make people mad.
I mean, it does motivate the voters. Last question for you, Congressman. Any election predictions for the midterms? Are the Republicans going to turn out? Is it going to be a red wave? Is it going to be a blue wave? What's going to happen in Congress? What's the balance of power going to look like? What do you feel, man?
Well, that's the $64,000 question. I will tell you today, people are not feeling it, and I think that we see that in the early returns and early voting. I think a lot of people are just not going to turn out right now. But we're just now getting into tax refund season. We're just now starting to see the green shoots of the economy is actually growing quite nicely. As I say, the rates are coming down. So we see green shoots in the larger economy as a whole. And I dismiss Wall Street, because Wall Street is Wall Street. The economy is something different. So I think if we get through the tax refund season, people start seeing the impact of the one big beautiful bill, and then we get the economy actually moving again to include the housing market as we talk. I think things will be dramatically different when we come to November. If you remember, back in Reagan's day, for his reelection, at this same time, he had horrible numbers, worse than President Trump. And yet he won 49 states in November. So, over his year prior to his reelection, President Reagan came roaring back because the economy came roaring back. So I think there's plenty of time for us to make a change. Today, people are not feeling it. By November, there's every chance that they will be feeling much better about what's happening, and I think we could see a significant win. I expect to hold the Senate for sure. The House is a little more dicey, but I think if we get things right, as Reagan did, we'll win the House again.
Awesome. I appreciate your insight. Congressman, if they want more information about your campaign, is that the best website, keithself.com?
That's it. Appreciate it.
Okay, great. Also, just want to mention we have another website out there, votetexasfirst.com. It's a new site, kind of gives you the voting records for your state legislators and a scorecard. And if there's any recommended challengers, you can go out there and type in your address and find that information. Congressman Self, it's always a pleasure to see you, my friend, and hope to see you out there soon somewhere in Collin County. God bless you, sir.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you for having me.
Bye bye. My next guest is my good friend Barbara Isaacs with Defending Our Republic here in Collin County. Barbara, how you doing tonight?
I'm great. Thank you for inviting me tonight.
Well, thanks for coming on our show. We've had a really robust discussion about stopping Islam in Texas, and I know that you are a local activist here in Collin County, and you are in the know on what's going on. A lot of mosques are being built right now in Texas at an alarming pace. Do you happen to know how many mosques have been built in Texas and specifically in Dallas Fort Worth?
Yes, I actually do. According to the property tax records here in Texas, that's what we use to do a count. It says there's 312 mosques in Texas currently, but that does not include the home-based mosques because there's a lot of them that are based out of homes. And then there's also these interfaith community centers, which I think is a way to disguise new mosques coming in because they're asking for permits for interfaith community centers. And these are mosques also. So in reality, it's probably closer to 400, but on paper, with the property tax records, it shows 312.
Wow, that's a lot of mosque. Now, Congressman Self just mentioned in the first segment that as a whole in America, Muslims only make up about 1.3% of our total population, but here in North Texas, it's a much higher percentage. I mean, why are many Muslims congregating in Texas? What's the agenda here?
Well, I mean, actually, some of the imams speak out heavily about this. I think that the gentleman that runs the Epic Mosque, which is Yasir Qadi, he's their golden boy. He was sent to Texas to grow the mosques and the settlement in Texas. So I think that it has a lot to do with him. As a matter of fact, I was watching him online the other day, and he was bragging about the population growth of their Muslim communities in Texas, but he says it's still not as big as he plans. And he said that, like in Australia, parts of Australia, they have more than 60% of the population, and in UK, 20%. He said in Texas, we're probably going to be at 10% soon. With his plans in mind, 10% with his plans.
I mean, that's a lot of Muslims, especially seeing how big Texas's population is. Now,
Mhm.
can you tell us, are these mosques mainly for religious worship, or are these cultural indoctrination centers?
Well, in my opinion, and from what I've seen happening, I call them city halls because they are primarily a government facility because this is where they recruit their candidates to run for office. And this is where they actually fund candidates out of the mosque as well. So I would say 90% of what takes place in the mosque is political, and then maybe on the Friday afternoons when they have worship, that is when they have some worship, but I would say a small percentage of it is used for worship. It's mostly political.
So, I mean, they are teaching people how to be, I'm assuming, Sharia adherent to their law. Can you just break down for us exactly what Islam is and how that relates to Sharia law?
Yes. So Islam is a political ideology. It is not a religion. As a matter of fact, there's a seventh grade textbook that has been published that I have that they use to teach their sixth and seventh graders. And in that book, it clearly states Islam is not a religion, but a whole way of life. And it states that in the books that they're teaching their children from. So even they don't believe it's a religion based on the school textbooks.
So, I mean, what does an Islamic life look like? I mean, what is it that they're trying to build as a culture here in Texas? What are they trying to do?
Well, it's Sharia law is very different than the United States Constitution. As a matter of fact, it is completely um, against what we believe in. For example, they believe that punishment for theft can be punishable by amputation. So that's not good. The freedom of speech does not exist in the mosque either. Anybody who belongs to Islam, you're not allowed to speak openly. And women are considered less than equal, I mean, less than 50% equal to the gentlemen, the men in the mosque, the men. So they don't have the same uh, ability to speak as the men do. So they're second class citizens essentially.
Right. Now, I brought this up with Congressman Self in the first part of our show. I talked about how in 2017, in the 85th Texas legislature, we passed a House Bill 45, which basically requires the Supreme Court to adopt rules ensuring that foreign laws are not applied in family law cases. Now, we know in Sharia, they apply Sharia law to marital cases, child custody cases, they do honor killings. They believe in marrying children for brides, all that kind of stuff. I guess my main question is if they are going before a Sharia court, whether it's in a private residence or a public place, I mean, our laws in our Texas courts will not even apply to a Sharia court, right? They would just usurp that with the way that they conduct their laws, right?
That's correct. Yeah, the Sharia courts are separate. To me, it's a parallel system. They're running their system alongside of our system. There was a case that was just a few years ago that was in a court here, a divorce case, and the judge in Collin County actually it was a couple getting a divorce, sent them to Sharia courts to do their arbitration. And I think that probably that was the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, because it set a precedent that that's okay, and that we basically observe Sharia as a legitimate legal system. I mean, this is such a mess when you look at, them trying to come and insert themselves into our culture here. It's just not compatible in any way, shape, or form.
Exactly. In a divorce case, if the children are over six, the husband, the father, automatically gets custody. The wife cannot have custody of the children.
And doesn't in Sharia law, can't the male or the husband just say, "I divorce you 3 times" and it's finalized? Isn't that how
Yes, I've even heard of cases where they text the woman and said, "I'm divorcing you" in a text message.
I mean,
Yes,
so basically, women have no rights under Islam.
exactly. They have no rights at all.
And you think about America and our history here. I mean, how many years, how many decades or centuries have women fought for women's rights? It's been a hard fought battle to get to where we are today. And then we have this whole counterculture coming in that is completely contrary to what we have all fought for, in America to be our standard. I mean, it's really crazy when you think about it.
Right. Even the women, they're beaten if they don't wear the hijabs to cover their hair. So if they're seen in public without covering their hair, it's a big problem, and the husband might beat them for not covering their hair.
Wow. So let's talk about hijabs for a second. How are Muslims becoming more vocal about their agenda?
Well, recently it was all over social media and the news at the Wiley East High School. They set up a table, a group called Why Islam set up a table there, and they were handing out hijabs, They were handing out Qurans and literature on Sharia. And as you know, teenagers are very impressionable. So this was very much a problem. And the parents were extremely upset that the school allowed this to happen, that they were able to get into the school and talk to the children about becoming Islamic. So that was a real problem.
Yeah, and I've also heard, I pastor in Frisco, but several years ago, I believe at one of our high schools, it might have been Liberty High School, there was a big debate over having a Muslim only prayer room during school hours. I mean, are they getting prayer rooms in our public schools as well?
Yes, I've identified 3 ISDs that have prayer rooms. Frisco ISD has prayer rooms in their high schools. Princeton ISD has prayer rooms in their high schools, and so does Wiley High Schools. So a lot of the public high schools have added prayer rooms for the Muslim students. And so what's amazing to me is that these Muslim students are being given special privileges that they can leave their seats during class 5 times a day to go pray, but the Christian children are not allowed to leave the classroom.
I mean, that's just crazy. And I mean, do you think this is part of their strategy for infiltrating a city? Because, like in Frisco right now, I know they just laid the foundation for is it the Quad Cities Mosque or some big mosque
Yes.
they're building? They just put the foundation in right there off of, I think it's Lebanon Road, close to 121. But before they built that, they were already putting a prayer room in Frisco ISD. Is that the pattern where they infiltrate like public schools and city governments and then they come in and build their mosque? Is that how they do it?
Yes, and another thing they do is they buy up the homes around the area where the mosque is, because they bought that land back in 2022. And then they started getting permits in 24 and 25. So they had already bought up a lot of the residences near where the mosque is going to go. So they start buying up properties around the mosque. So they surround themselves with only Muslim communities.
Yeah, and let's talk about Epic now. This is a good segue for that. The East Plano Islamic Center. I remember several months back, you and I were in a Collin County Commissioner's Court hearing about Epic City trying to be built outside of Josephine. But one of the Plano police officers, I believe a retired detective, talked about how they've bought up all the property around the police station and the mosque. How do they do that in neighborhoods? Like what's their strategy there?
Yeah, that was Doug Deaton. He's a former Plano police officer, and he brought a lot of information to us because he had been monitoring the situation for about 20 years over there, and he's seen it grow by leaps and bounds. And that is quite an amazing story because they do own all of the properties around that mosque. In fact, if you drive into that area, you'll see all the businesses are written in Arabic as well. All the business names are Arabic as well. That whole area, that whole part of the city is all Arabic.
And didn't the police officer also mention that one of the properties overlooks the police compound?
Yes. So there is a training station there where they train new officers. And there's an area in the back that's fenced in where they keep their bomb trucks and the SWAT team trucks. And of course, it's a secure area. But what happened is the Muslims bought this. Well, they didn't buy it; they built it. It's a multi-million-dollar home that sits directly behind the fenced area where the SWAT team trucks and the bomb trucks are kept. And the home is literally built almost right up against their fence, and it has a platform on the back, and then in the that's above the fence line that's overlooking the police station. And also there's like a siren system there too that is pointed directly at the home, and the home has 2 front doors to it. So it's very suspicious that anyone would build a multi-million-dollar home with a siren system that's pointing at their back patio as well as their balcony platform area. So they have he considers it a possible shooting platform. We're not sure, but it sure looks very suspicious where they built that. home. I mean, because if you had several $1 million, why would you build it overlooking a facility like that and with a siren that's right there next to your home?
You would not do that. Most people would not do that. So that doesn't make any sense. It's very suspect. So let's drill into this epic city. There's a project they're trying to build outside of Josephine. Tell us about that project. What are they trying to build out there?
Okay, so they have 400 acres and it straddles two counties. It straddles Hunt County and Collin County. And they want to build a mosque and an Islamic school and a residential neighborhood and also retail center. Of course, when they first started really promoting and advertising this a year ago, they were very vocal on X, selling those lots, and they were saying, they were actually promoting it to foreign investors to come and buy properties inside that area. They sold out very quickly, all of the lots, but it was being promoted only as a Muslim community, and that's the way they were promoting it. They got in trouble a little bit with the Fair Housing Act. There was an issue, there was a lawsuit that was filed and then later dropped. But now I understand something like that has come back again just this week with the HUD secretary. But anyway, because they're only promoting to sell it to Muslims, not to anyone else. And of course, if you buy into that community, you are required to pay into the mosque as well into the Islamic school. Part of your monthly fees go in there. They were also trying to prevent anybody who bought in there, they couldn't resell to anyone other than someone that they found suitable to live in that home is the way they worded it. It had to be a suitable person that they could sell it to. So in other words, they were going to keep it exclusively Muslim, even after if somebody bought and had to move out.
So the money that's going to the mosque from the landowners that are buying the lots, is that the like 8% tithe or the jiza, or what exactly is that fee going to the mosque? Is that coming out of the
I
mosque?
don't know the exact fee. I have looked over some of those contracts, but it's been a while since I read them. But I do know for a fact they do have to pay in to the mosque and the Islamic schools. Whoever buys in there has to do that. But it's an exclusive community.
And doesn't Epic City, aren't they partners with the developer? Aren't they pocketing off the profit of selling all these lots as well?
Yes, it appears that it's Community Capital Partners is the financial arm of Epic City, which has now been renamed the Meadow. And in between that, it was also they joined hands with D.R. Horton and they formed a mud district out there as well.
Now let's talk about this mud district. So something happened with the D.R. Horton board and this double R2A mud district back in September. Tell us about that. You were a part of you witnessed that. What happened there?
Yeah, I actually was there during the board meeting. It was quite surprising. One of the ranchers out there happened to notice a little tiny 8-inch by 11-inch sheet of paper posted it in the middle of the farm field. And they got out of their truck and walked over there and took a picture of it because we didn't. And they alerted a few of us. So a handful of us were able to go to the public meeting, board meeting that was held in the middle of the farm field. And so there was an attorney from, okay, what's the name of the law firm? Now I'm forgetting the name of the law firm. But there was an attorney from the law firm here in Dallas that was there holding the board meeting. And on one side of him were five gentlemen from D.R. Horton. And then there were on the other side of him were five gentlemen, Muslim men. And so what he did is one by one, he had each board member from D.R. Horton step down, and the Muslims were sworn in to this mud district called double R2A. So that's the new. They did a workaround essentially. The mud district was approved for D.R. Horton, not for Community Capital Partners or Epic City or the Meadow, but D.R. Horton sold the mud district to them.
Now, this mud district, is this what is needed to get the water supplied to these homes? Is when do they need the
Yes, yes, MUD means municipal utility district, and so that would mean that they would be building these giant water towers to hold water so that they could have water for those 400 acres. That's correct.
But don't they still need a permit from the TCEQ to be able to get the water rights?
It appears that D.R. Horton was able to get those permits and then sold it off to the community capital partners. It appears that when TCEQ was approached by D.R. Horton, that some of these permits were. Now, I'm not sure if it's finalized because, to my understanding, is the community capital partners. They also are trying to annex some additional land, so there might be a holdup based on that. But I'm not so sure that any of this was handled, properly because I've never been to a board meeting that was handled in handled in the middle of a farm field before, so I don't even know if any of this was legal.
I mean, so when you and I were at the Collin County Commissioners meeting testifying against this project, at that time they didn't have the TCEQ permit. There's no water to this property. So did DR Horton backdoor this thing and went and got the permit for the water and then sold, either sold or transferred the board positions? And is DR Horton going to be the builder of the houses? I mean, how are they involved in this?
You know, I don't know who the builder's going to be, but it does look very suspicious that D.R. Horton from on the front end was involved, and all I can do is speculate that maybe there was a lot of foreign cash or money coming in that they just were very tempted and went forth with it and sold the mud district to them.
So, I mean, the last time they came before the commissioner's court, they didn't have the appropriate documentation. They didn't have all their eggs, or chickens in a row. So now that they've got the TCEQ, now they got the mud district, now I'm assuming they've got all their ducks in a row. Is the county commissioner's court going to approve the project and let them build it? Or, I mean, what's going to happen here?
I really don't know at this point, but I know that a new lawsuit came out yesterday from Attorney General Ken Paxton's office, and he is concerned about this transaction that happened with the mud district being D.R. Horton, and then it was a bait and switch kind of a situation, and I'm not sure if that was all handled legally. I'm not familiar enough with mud districts, but it does look suspicious about how the board meeting was handled, and the public doesn't look like we were properly notified. So possibly there's some problems there with D.R. Horton's involvement and how that was handled.
Didn't Governor Abbott go out there several months ago and say, "Hey, I stopped Epic City. It's done. It's not going to be built." I mean, he went out there and said that to people.
Yeah. Well, that actually is not true. He did not stop anything because obviously, until the courts say to stop, we just because he says that he stopped it doesn't mean it's been stopped. The Attorney General's office and these lawsuits are the only thing that can stop this from happening. Because that's their private property, and I don't see how the governor could say something like that. And it kind of upsets me a little bit that he said that because it made people let their guards down and think that everything's fine now, but everything's not fine. They're still actively moving forward.
Yeah, that's what I thought, and that's what I've heard coming out of the commissioner's court is they're still pursuing approval from the county commissioners, which underscores why this election is so important this month because who we elect as the new county commissioners may very well be the yes or no vote that we get on the project. So let's talk about the $64,000 question. What can we, the citizens, do to stop Islam?
Okay, well, number one, we've got this proposition coming up on the ballot in Texas here called Proposition 10, and it's to stop Sharia law in Texas. Now, we'd like everybody to go vote yes. We want to stop Sharia law in Texas. Now, I will tell you that is more of an opinion piece rather than a piece of law, because what'll happen is it'll just help launch some pressure on our state legislators during the next session, the 90th legislative session, to write some laws to stop Sharia law happening in Texas. So but we still need to turn out that vote, because if we don't turn out that vote, then they're not going to write the legislation that we need. And it's amazing to me that our United States Constitution is not actually protecting us on all of this that's happening as well, because I feel like the Constitution should, if it was being really um, looked at in a strong way, I think we should be able to stop it without any additional laws. But
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I've been really doing some digging as well on our state constitution. And, Article 1, Section 6, under freedom of worship, basically says Texas cannot elevate or enforce any religious system. But it also says that it cannot control or interfere with the rights of conscience in matters of religion. So it's almost like a catch 22 that says we're not going to elevate one religion over the other, but we're also not going to prevent you from practicing what your conscience dictates. So my argument is, well, what if Muslims say my conscience dictates that we practice Sharia law because it's ingrained in everything we believe? How do you legally, or from a constitutional standpoint, say, well, you can't do that because that's not compatible with our Constitution? There's a loophole here.
yeah, we actually, at the federal level, we need to remove their religious status, because they are a political machine. They are not a religious. I mean, they should have never been granted religious designation. They should be rebranded as a political movement, not a religious movement. So I think that that's something else we need to work on. That needs to be done.
Yeah. One of the things that Congressman Self said in the first half of the interview tonight was that the main pushback from Muslims is not going to be under the First Amendment, that they're protected as freedom of religion. They're going to push the narrative that we're discriminating against them and that we hate them. We're Islamophobes. Do you get a lot of pushback with that in what you're doing, where they're just saying, oh, you're a bunch of Islamophobes, you hate Muslims, and that's what they're trying to use to push their agenda forward? Or are you hearing other arguments like, you can't stop us because we are protected under the First Amendment? What are you hearing?
Well, I mean, it's really the rhetoric that you see online, like on social media and some of their interviews. They are calling us Islamophobics. I can't even say it, Islamophobics. But we obviously we want them to come here and assimilate and adapt to our culture. They should not be here to change our culture, because America was founded as a godly nation and we are a godly nation. So they need to adapt to our ways rather than coming here and trying to change us. So I'm completely against what they're doing. And of course, the way they treat their people, it's wrong. I mean, there's just so many things that are wrong that they're doing, and I can't imagine anyone. In fact, I have several friends now that were former Muslims that are now Christians, and they're probably the biggest advocates to speak out against this, because they realize, like one told me the other day, he said, I never was a Muslim, and I said, what do you mean? He says, because I didn't practice. He says, I just had to play the act so that they wouldn't kill me or hurt me, until I got out of the country and came to America, where I could be. And he says, now I'm a practicing Christian, but I couldn't do that in the Middle East, because they would have killed me for not acting as a Muslim. So he says, to me, it was just all an act. And he says there's a lot of them over there that do that, exactly what he was doing.
Yeah. Well, let's in the last part here of our interview, let's talk about your organization, Defending Our Republic. I've got your website up there on the screen. What do you do at Defending Our Republic, and how can people get involved?
Okay, so yes, that's our website, defendingourrepublic.com. And there's a lot of good resources and information there if people want to read the explanatory memorandum, which is the blueprint, what the Muslim Brotherhood wrote back in 1991. And it was discovered during the Holy Land Foundation trials, which happened here in Dallas, Texas, back in 2007 and 2008. That's a wonderful document to read, because they say in their own words exactly what they're here for, what they plan to do, which is to take over our political system and replace it with Sharia. So that's what they're here for. They say it in their own words. But what I'm doing is I'm going out and talking to pastors and educating them on what the Islamics are doing here and what the purpose of them being here is, and showing them where it is a political system, it's not a religious system, and it's okay to talk about it because that's what they're doing. And then I also educate elected officials, and then I also have classes for citizens to come to where they can learn how they can engage so that they can go to city council meetings, planning and zoning meetings, county commissioner court meetings, and everything we do is legal and lawful. But we just point out to these people on council or planning and zoning that there are codes and ordinances that they can use, and they shouldn't just give the mosques or the Islamic schools a free pass every time they want to get a permit, but they need to require, drainage studies and traffic studies and noise studies and things like that before they approve them. So we just need to use our voices so that these planning and zoning people and city council people understand that we're watching and that we expect them to do their jobs and not rubber stamp everything. And so the pastors are really listening too. I mean, we have several churches now that are reaching out and wanting to learn more.
That's fantastic. So if somebody wants to sign up for one of your classes, how do they do that?
They could email me. There's an email address there on the website. They could just email me at the email address on there, and we'd be happy to set something up for them.
Fantastic. Well, hey guys, appreciate everyone coming onto our show tonight. Barbara, thank you so much for being my guest and sharing your knowledge and insight on this issue. Once again, we just want to remind everybody we do have early voting going on right now for the primary election. One of the websites I'm referring people to is votetexasfirst.com. See how your Texas lawmakers voted in the 89th session. There's a score out there for each legislator and senator. And also, if we have any recommended challengers, we list that information as well. And early voting will go on through the week, and then we'll have the election day on March the 3rd. And when you go vote, please don't forget Proposition 10 is very important. Please vote yes on Prop 10. So thank you so much again, Barbara. It was good having you on the show tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, take care, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye bye.